I've learnt some good slang today.
Yeah, poggers.
Poggers, yeah.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that I've taught you any of the current slang. It's awful, actually.
No,
I should
it
not.
gives me a good idea for dialogue in a romantic story. Boy meets girl and say, "Will you marry me?" And she says, "Yes," and he says, "Poggers."
Oh, you are amazing, Robert. You are fantastic.
It's really
Please
good.
write that.
Update of Romeo and Juliet.
Poggers.
So Romeo and Juliet rewritten by
Yeah.
Rob. I think that's
Poggers.
brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
I have not had an outburst of laughter for a long time, so thank you very much.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
good.
thank-
That's good, Nikki. Okay.
Thank you.
So just in case you weren't aware, I caught all that on camera. We are rolling.
Oh no! Amazing.
Okay. Anyway, so today we welcome everybody to the podcast where we wait for XJ to wake up from his morning coffee.
It's called Roll Off a Tangent, but you probably saw that like down there.
Yeah. Anyway, today we're going to talk about what was
The
name?
Slavaans must play.
Something about. Why don't you take it away, Rob? Just the title.
Yeah, The Slavaans Must Play. It's a horror story based on a nightmare which I had. I really don't like nightmares. I don't enjoy them at all. So I was determined to get some profit out of this one. Make a story out of it, yeah? Usually, I find it almost impossible to write a short story. They keep ballooning out into novellas, and then from there maybe into novels. But this time, just for once, I succeeded in writing a short story, thanks to the visionary nightmare, which tells me what to do. Basically, I'm not saying that all the details were in the dream, but it gave it the oomph, the power. The actual dream, all the detail I can remember was staring up a stairwell and seeing some streamers fluttering down at me like they were Christmas decorations, and then suddenly the streamers fleshed out and became arms, multi-jointed arms reaching down to grab me, and I ran like hell and fumbled with a bolt, and I found that I was on the wrong side of the door trying to close it instead of open it, and so that lost me a few precious seconds, but then I managed to wrench it open and run forward, and that's about it. So from that very sketchy starting point, I invented a story about two-dimensional invaders who infiltrate and try and make other people two-dimensional like them, and the result from the point of view of the changed person is that you start to see the two-dimensional streamers as three-dimensional because you're just on the same level with them. Anyway, there we go. That's how Pluto invaded Earth.
Anyway, that's in your history books.
So,
by the way.
so
Yeah.
that's really fascinating. So this would explain how the story actually went. How like there were parts of the story where I was like, when I was reading it, I was like trying to make out what actually happened, and the door part was like the one I was like, why is he trying this door and then they are all of a sudden on the same side? I'm like trying to configure the scene in my mind and I just could not work it out.
I think that's part of the horror, isn't it? Because they're two-dimensional beings. It's like imagining a situation where you're just met with something that is incomprehensible to us as humans. Is what
Yes. That's
is what-
right.
is
It's
what really
partly
captured
why the invasion succeeded. I make that point in the story when Grandpa reminisces about why it succeeded, because people just were too incredulous that two-dimensional things sliding around on a nitrogen glacier on Pluto could possibly have enough in common with Earth beings to want to invade our world? What would be in it for them? Whereas actually, I also make the point that if you're two-dimensional, it might be that you actually get attracted to a world with lots of two-dimensional surfaces on its architecture. So they'd have lots of places to slide around on if they came here.
Yeah.
Anyway,
for sure.
it's a fanciful thought, you know.
It's a crazy thought for sure.
It very how do I say this? Like when I was reading the short story, I was reminded of Flatland.
Yes.
Edwin
Abbott.
Abbott's very interesting introduction. For me, it was a very interesting introduction to geometric dimensions.
Ideas. Yes.
And
I've read Flatland. Yeah.
Have you?
It didn't influence this story at all, but yes, I have read Flatland. Yeah, it's all about the triangular women and how sharp their points are, and how
actually women are a line.
No, sorry. Yes, women are lines. Yes, that's right. They're even sharper than triangles. That's right. Yes. And they disappear if you look at them
head on.
Down. Yes,
and they're exceedingly dangerous because one could walk into that point and burst themselves.
That's right. That's right. It's all coming back to me now. Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
That was
horrifying
stuff. Yep.
Yeah.
But
it did remind me of that, and yeah. So I was wondering if Flatland had like any bit of influence, but apparently not, according to you.
No. Flatland is quite a cheerful, merry sort of book.
Cheerful.
Whereas this, I think so. Despite the dangers, of walking into a woman and getting transfixed. I think quite
oh boy.
And the philosophers are circles, aren't they? A circle is the best thing to be if you're a Flatlander. The highest status.
Yeah, because they have many sides.
Well, in infinite number of sides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it totally. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm just like getting sidetracked into the mathematical thing and being a 3D modeler.
Getting sidetracked is what these podcasts are all about. I think.
Absolutely true. That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
So, Edwin, as a protagonist in this story, is in some way, shape, or form, he seems to be in a way like given up on the idea of like anything that can be changed, from what I see, and the fact that the grandfather gives him something to do that isn't just existing, he seems to welcome it, but at the same time he dreads to do anything about it. So I think that's one of those cornerstones of a good point of view character, where you get to experience with them something strange and very horrifying, because at the end of the story, spoilers, at the end of the story, you basically get to realize what exactly happened to the people, as he speaks to the sheet of meat, basically, and calls it Aunt Denise.
Yeah, right? It's a sort of curtain type shape with a face on it. Yeah. But the thing is that this lad Edwin doesn't really have much of a future, and he nevertheless he's not too depressed because he just lives in the moment, and he doesn't have any future to speak of, and also he doesn't really live in a society as a whole. There isn't really any society left. There's just a very restricted viewpoint. You just live in your building and from moment to moment. And that's rather handy for me writing the story, because I can not feel obliged to answer too many questions about how Earth was in general getting on under these invaders from Pluto, because the character himself doesn't know anything about it.
So a
I think
dumb protagonist has its advantages.
Yeah. Well, restricted protagonist.
Restricted protagonist. Well, that's true. My own protagonist is a mute and he doesn't speak, so it cuts out a lot of dialogue on my part. Although it presents other challenges.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting dodge, that, of a character who can't speak.
Well, but I do like the way the short story was constructed, because for the very first for a very large part of the story, I was still in my mind trying to construct what's actually going on, and my thought was underneath and cousin whatever had already passed on, and our protagonist was just like basically talking to himself, and I was wondering who was the person that summoned Edwin to his grandpappy's side. And then at the very end, when he told underneath to swirl away, that's when everything just like hit. And I thought that is what a horror short story. That's one way of writing a very good horror short story. A very Ray Bradbury type of approach, where the ending has a big punch and then you're kind of left with this realization at the end.
I think
I hope there's some clues, but yes, I agree with what XJ is saying.
The clues just become more and more apparent because you reach the end. Now you look at all those clues in a new light, because now you have the answer. So if you didn't figure it out by yourself, which admittedly happens a lot when you read a short story, right? Like now rereading it, when I reread it, I realized how much precursor you've given to the idea of these of what happened to humanity. But I think one of my favorite lines in the entire thing, it's a short sentence, but thinking about the last part of the story, this really is something that I think I would also experience if I was lost in such a world like Edwin. What used to be a terrible disability is now something enviable. And what Edwin is basically saying, the fact that the grandfather is blind, is something that he would actually probably prefer, because he does not want to see the horrors that are in front of him. He doesn't want to experience them. And maybe perhaps even, I mean, this is just me trying to analyze it, as I'm not the one who's written it, but as the viewer, maybe Edwin envies that his grandfather never had to see it anyways. If Edwin became blind now, it still would not make those horrible images go away, whereas his grandfather had never had to witness it.
Yeah, I suppose that's the Lovecraftian idea of, it's better not to know what's going on.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to say about this story is its bearing on what I call, what shall I call it, sort of excuseology. That is to say, so as to shift some of the burden of work onto the reader, so that the writer doesn't have to work everything out. I think the thing to do when writing anything really is to achieve a sort of critical mass of coherence. You can't make everything coherent, but you can achieve a critical mass beyond which you enlist the reader in working out any loose ends, so that you don't have to work them all out yourself. Now, one loose end in this story is I'm not quite sure what the grandfather's sketches were all about. There's some hint that it's a sort of safe conduct that he's giving his grandson a safe conduct in the form of diagrams to show the creatures, the Plutonians. But what is actually the point of it? I'm not sure. The grandfather seems to want to. Well, I suppose he wants to confirm that the actual building is infested. He's not sure whether it is. I suppose it makes sense on that level.
So here I actually want to ask Nikki something.
Okay.
What? So because you brought up a really interesting point, Rob. I was about to ask you about the book. So Nikki, what was your thoughts when you came to the book section?
So I thought that because the grandfather is blind, that he has a very different perception of reality. And because of that very different perception of reality within this horror story, he sees the Plutonians for what they are, in a sense. So I thought that he has created these sketches, and sort of this, and that's something that we mentioned last week, where sci-fi and fantasy have very similar connective tissue sometimes. So there is a lot of things in fantastical literature where, like, if you know the true name of a demon or its true face, somehow you have the power over it. So I thought, because the grandfather has this unaltered sight, because he is blind, he perceives them the way they actually exist, these images somehow scare these creatures away, or keep Edwin protected. That's what I thought they were.
Interesting.
I thought so. My thoughts on the book was remarkably similar to what Nikki just described. I thought it was a talisman of some sort, and it's somehow what's on the book wards the what do they call it? Thiddin Snewn.
Thiddin Snewn, yes.
Thiddin Snewn away, or it traps the Thiddin Snewn into the book. And I was looking for clues as to what the book actually does. And this is very fascinating to me that actually you just haven't worked out that part.
No, I hadn't. But my conscience was salved by the fact that I thought, well, it's not my fault I'm writing all this. It's this dream, that told me to write it. So that lets me off. Really, I can just assume.
Okay.
I can just assume that this stuff wells up from the subconscious, and it must have some meaning, whether I can work it out or not.
It's fair enough. I mean, if the starting point is a dream, then I think it's all good. It does have a very dreamlike quality to the whole thing, where some parts are kind of disconnected. But I think that works in this context because so two things. One, it does have this really disconcerting, it does paint a very disconcerting atmosphere where I as a reader am just like trying to connect the dots, but a lot of things are just missing, and I'm just like wondering what's going on, like this really creepy feeling, which I think the short story succeeded. The other thing is I actually like stories set in incomprehensible ruins. One of the other things. The other things that I was trying to because the way it is described in the story, right? Like the buildings and everything, like the environment actually makes no geometric sense from my point of view because I can't piece them together. I'm a very visual guy. So whatever you are writing down, I can usually see it very clearly inside here, and then I can map it out in my mind. But I'm just not able to really construct a building that makes sense, and it actually works really well in this context because I do like stories that are set in places that's completely incomprehensible, has a very vast alien sense to it if done well. And there are a few titles that I was reminded of when I was reading your book. One is Flatland, of course, and the other one is this manga called and I'm blanking out.
Uzumaki?
No. It's by a guy called Tsutomu Nihei, and he wrote a few books. Blame. It's called Blame.
Blame. Okay.
Blame.
I'm not familiar.
It requires a lot of work on the reader's part to try to piece things together, and it almost never and the picture is not complete anyway. But the one thing that is really cool about that comic book series is that the buildings are because Nihei's background is as an architect, and the way he constructed his scenes are just like buildings of really vast dimensions that stretches out into infinity and beyond. And I'm just like left wondering who built all this stuff.
Yes.
It's about to be foul mouth there, but
yes.
myself. Yeah. So those were my two big thoughts when I was reading the short story.
You reminded me, actually, it's a bit off topic, but talking of architecture, a short story by J.G. Ballard, who's usually not one of my favourites, but it's called Build Up. And it's set probably hundreds of million years in the future, where it seems like the whole universe is just one building. I mean, that obviously really ridiculous because, gravity would start to crush it together. But nobody has ever seen the end of the building in this story. They can't imagine it. They can't imagine that it ever comes to an end. It's a really eerie story.
Yeah.
Anyway, be that as it may. So there we are. Plutonians. Plutonians don't have to stay cold because they're only two-dimensional. I thought that was quite a good excuse, really, to make Plutonians and Earth people meet. Otherwise, impossible.
How did they travel from Pluto to Earth? I know you didn't flesh that part out, but I'm pressing you on it since you're here.
I suppose we'll have to just create some kind of excuse for it to happen. This is the kind of work which is a sort of like a make work project for readers. It's now down to the readers to create an excuse for how these two-dimensional beings. I mean, perhaps they rode back on a exploratory ship that was unwise enough to land there. I don't know. Could be like a sort of plague, or maybe there's something in the story about them sliding here, isn't there? I believe.
Yeah. Well, I thought that's somehow connected to the central heating, central colding system that they keep talking about.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's a way of linking the idea that the humans and Plutonians can, as it were, merge, so that what's cold to one person can be warm, if you see what I mean, to another.
Of course.
That's the kind of excuse behind it, anyway.
What if the basically, because of what we did to our planet, we got it hot enough that they could sense it, and then they traveled to us?
But why would they wish to? I don't suppose it would make much difference to them whether it was global warming or not.
They would just realize that there are people here.
Yes, that's true.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. People.
Yeah, I don't mean that they're like, heat. They're more like, oh, heat. Cool. So let's investigate.
Cool. Yes.
Yeah, you got the pun.
Yes. Yes. One of my pupils liked a rocking chair that I had, which was just near the radiator. He used to sit in it and he used to say when the radiator was full on, "Oh, cool,"
No, wait.
Anyway.
You have a rocking chair?
I have two rocking chairs, actually.
You have two rocking chairs. Okay,
Do you use them simultaneously?
I'm thinking to myself now. Should I have a rocking chair, or should I continue with my dream of a hammock?
Oh, I don't know about that.
I don't like hammocks.
You need someone to sort of rock it, don't you? If it's a hammock, but rocking chair you can rock yourself.
You have no clue just how good it feels to be sleeping in a hammock in a hot sun.
Right.
It is very cool.
I never feel safe on a hammock. I feel like I will fall off any second. So I cannot be in one.
It does require not to toss and turn, or else you would fall off.
I am unable to do what you have just described. So, so I have a question.
Yes.
So, well, I thought obviously that the boy is safe because of the book, but why is the grandfather safe? Because he seems to be 3-dimensional too. So what's with him? Are they just not interested in blind people, or they're like how does he get to live this?
Maybe they haven't got round to him yet. Yes, that's a
Uh-huh.
point. Yeah. But no, you're probably right. It probably blind person is sort of beneath their notice. Maybe I don't know. Yeah.
There seems to there were allusions to assimilation process that needs to be undertaken willingly in the story. It's very similar to the Borgs that I remember. Yeah.
To what?
The Borgs in Star Trek.
Have you not seen Star Trek, Rob?
Well, not since the very early ones.
Okay. So the Borg collective is like a mechanical plague on the universe. They sort of assimilate you into their own species whenever possible, and their catchphrase is "resistance is futile," because at some point you will just join them. There is no way to escape this fate. So I think that's where XJ tried to inhabit that parallel.
Yeah. So you in the end you give up and you invite them, sort of thing. It's a bit like the rule that vampires can only enter your house if you invite them in. Yeah. Although that rule doesn't seem to be strictly observed in the vampire stories I've read. But anyway, I mean Stephen King mentions the rule and then he forgets it about halfway through his book Salem's Lot. But anyway, never mind. Yes. So yeah, what was the question? It was about the grandfather, wasn't it?
Yeah, how come he's alive?
Yeah, that is a very interesting question. Fortunately, I didn't think of it while I was writing. Otherwise, it might have, made it longer. And I'm really pleased with how short it is.
You know what? Okay. Quick workshop. This is what I would do. I'd make the process of like turning into a 2-dimensional thing like real slow. So like when the kid looks at him, he's like, "Yeah, it's great that you're blind because like your legs are already flat. Like you have no clue that you're slowly turning into this thing."
Yes. Yeah. So it's just as well he can't see it because it would worry him.
Yeah, exactly. And it would also add to the idea that man, it's great that you're blind because you have no like it would be probably so horrifying.
Yes. That's a point. Yeah.
There you go. $5 for that.
Right. Gosh.
Yeah, high rates. It's all because of the pandemic. Had to raise them up. No, but really, I mean, there's a lot of potential in the story, and it's one of those open-ended. Think of the first episode that we did of this podcast. Robert E. Howard left the Tower of the Elephant exactly in the same way. Like, where's Conan gonna go? What's he gonna do? What's Edwin gonna do? We don't know, but
no. I mean, he might.
The mind begins to wonder. Sorry, go on.
You've made me wonder now that he might. After getting Aunt Denise to swirl aside, he opens the door and then he finds that Grandpa has started to become a flatty as well.
Wait, what was the word you used?
Oh, and he's becoming... Okay, I know why. So the grandfather, he knew that this was going to happen to him because he gave the book away.
Right, yes.
So he's like, I'm old, so I'm going to die anyway. So Edwin is the last hope of humanity. Yeah. So here you go. Here's the book.
Yes, the story would be a bit less cheerful than it is if we added that to it. But yeah.
Well, it's my fan fiction of what happened next.
Hmm. Yes, there's a lot to be said for that. Yeah.
Maybe you'll write a second story that's much more frightening. Who knows?
Well, I have to wait for you.
I have a feeling though that if the story is fleshed out, a lot of the power of the atmosphere would be lost along the way.
Well, that's why we put this at the end, right, and not in the middle or something.
Yes, absolutely. It would dissipate the whatever oomph it had. If
the mystery.
Yeah. It's like that Bradbury story, The Dragon. It's only 3 pages long. I've mentioned it before, haven't I? And
You did, yeah.
it really packs a punch. But if you made a novella out of it, then it'd just be it would lose everything that made it good.
Yeah. I mean, some mysteries, I think the best kind of atmospheric works happen when the mysteries are left unexplained. Like we probably should never know how the Plutonians actually managed to traverse all the way from Pluto to Earth. We probably shouldn't know what the book actually does. We probably shouldn't know much about the Thiddin Snewn.
Yeah.
Or the ecology or anything like that.
Because the character himself doesn't know, and what's more, he knows that he probably never will know.
Mm-hmm. But a hint of the assimilation process would have been fantastic.
You mean like a part way, an example of it being part way?
Yeah, just a hint. That would have been fantastic.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
But anyway, I think the story works as it stands, and the atmosphere is very well crafted. It does have a very strong sense of that disjointedness of a dream, which it sprang from anyway. And so I think Rob, you had very properly conveyed that feeling, like recreated that feeling, and that actually I think is really cool because I'm not sure I can do that. I would be so tempted to fill in the blanks, and I would fill in the blanks, and then that feeling of being in a dream would have dissipated.
Well, I've reached the age of 67 and a half, nearly, and I've managed to write one successful short story, I think. So that shows how hard it is for me to do this. And if it weren't for the nightmare, I'd never have managed it. So, but whether I actually would think it worthwhile to have more nightmares to do it, do more, I very much doubt it. It's just.
I mean, just eat.
You must suffer for your art, Rob.
Just eat cheese and meat before going to bed, and then you'll be fine.
Yeah, raw meat preferably. Yeah.
Raw meat. That's right.
That's so caveman, man.
Oh boy. I have the opposite issue. I've had the opposite issue, I guess. I am much more into writing short stories than I am into writing something long and arduous. And I think that's because I like the idea of total control, and it is much easier to totally control 5 pages instead of 300. So when I'm writing a story, I want it to be exactly like, instead of creating a cake, I make a cupcake. But this cupcake, it has everything that I want. It's a gram for gram how it should be. And there's something very rewarding about having this complete little package, which gives you the, thing that you desire.
A short story is not just a short edition of a long story. A short story is a different kind of thing. It's a snapshot or a vignette or whatever you want to call it. It's structurally different from a longer story, isn't it? I mean, that's why short stories, they need some sort of punchline usually. Not always, but I find it very difficult.
Why do you find it difficult? What is it about a short story that is so impenetrable in your opinion?
Because I need to invent a background, and I need to invent events against that background, and one thing leads to another, and before very long there's just space enough in a short story to put it all in. So to keep it short, I would have to keep it simple, and stories to me are not simple.
Right, I feel that. I understand that. So the way I deal with that is I usually create one space, one grand idea, one grand universe. So if I'm writing in fantasy, I have a setting in which I will always write this fantasy. I will seldom go into a different idea of a fantasy, like a different world, for any of my short stories, because there's this one world that I have decided on, and because I keep coming back to it, and it's a recurring thing, I don't have to reinvent a background for anything. It's the same as Robert E. Howard, where he had this Hyperborean age created, and that's what he has written in. You know, a lot of his fantasy stories is in that, and that's really helpful when you want to create more than one short story, because in this big universe that you've concocted in your mind, there are little bits and pieces which are interesting to you. There's a story that I wrote which is called Arrows, and it's about a soldier who spoilers for Arrows. It's about a soldier who fights in this war, and we meet him in a point where he basically, his sentence for life has just occurred. He will not survive the end of the short story. We meet him when 3 arrows pierce his body and he falls into the ground, and through his basically last dying breath we get to see the end of battle. We get to see the end of this like invasion of this castle. And then he gets to, for a moment, see the guy who he fought for, the king, like walk through basically this destroyed battlefield through the corpses of the dead. And basically, because I constructed it that this guy's gonna die, right? So we have a very finite time with him. He's gonna die at the end of the story. I thought to myself, well, what is a person gonna be thinking when they're dying? So obviously he was thinking about the situation that was occurring. He was thinking about the people that he's going to leave behind, because, well, it's medieval times and there's 3 arrows in you, so you're probably dead, right? So when you constrain yourself, a great short story is produced. So I would advise that what you said is the sort of the power block that is in front of you is actually something that you should use as a tool to restrict yourself. Put 2 blocks in front of you. Say you have 10 minutes within this situation, and you have to go through 10 minutes of narrative and make it interesting. How do I do that? Right?
Yeah.
I am reminded of a interview that I have seen from Orson Scott Card. And he described the difference between a short story, how one would approach a short story, and a long form story. And he described it as a short story, you start from the ending and then work your way towards the beginning. And that is actually very close to what I just heard Nikki describe, because we start with the end of the soldier, the guy is dying basically. We work our way to the front, and that is the key difference between a long form and a short form story. And a short story is to him anyway, we have to think of the ending first, and sort of work our way forward. Whereas for a long form story, typically the ending, and I found this to be the same when I write my story, is that the ending changes so much. Yeah.
So it's not what you thought you were going to write.
We start from the front in a long form story.
Whereas in a like, to me, a short story is a snippet. There's an entire world which will happen before and after the short story, and this little snippet is for some reason important, and it is your duty as an author to make sure that this importance and this gravitas is portrayed in this small time. And if it is done really well, you get something like Tower of the Elephant, right?
Yeah.
And I think also the Slavaans must play. I would put it in the same category, because I really felt like, although it's a short time that I spent with Edwin, the things that he went through and the situation that we get to explore with him was so poignant and horrifying. Another thing that I really liked about the story was how I felt like it was written within the mind of the child. Like the words that are used and the way he perceives things. I mean, I am child no longer, but I think this is sort of like the way I thought. It was a bit more, sort of wondrous about things, rather than being very concrete about what I think and see.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you thought that. I often write about young protagonists, and I have the worry that I'm making them too old mentally, But yeah, I suppose if you write about a bright youngster, there's enough overlap between a bright youngster and a dim oldster to make it a possible thing to do. Yeah, the thing about short stories and novellas and novels is that you haven't got a hope of writing a short story if your theme is the wrong sort of theme. You can probably write a novella about just about any theme, but a short, some of them won't do. I wrote a novella called The Shears of Night, about the theme that sleep is a kind of interruption of consciousness, just like death. So there's no proof that you're the same sort of person, that you're the same person when you wake up after having slept. There's no proof that you're the same. So it's the same worry as if there were a matter transmission system, and your atoms were decomposed in the sending station and recomposed in the receiving station. Would you be the same person if you were scanned and then broken down and then built up again? Common theme in science fiction, and people argue about that, but that you can use the same argument about going to sleep and waking up again. How do you know if your consciousness has been interrupted that you're the same person?
Rob, that sounds like a great premise for another short story. Some guy who's so freaked out by the idea of sleeping and waking up as a different person that he doesn't go to sleep.
So do you think then one could actually make it a short out of it? Because I couldn't. It was fairly long. I'll tell you how many pages it was. Hang on.
Oh, he's gone.
It's all right. I'm coming back.
I know you're coming back.
I just wanted to see how many pages it was. It's really fairly short. 17 pages. That's not
too bad.
It's not too long. Is that the book that you published before, Rob?
It's a collection of stories set on my invented world.
So hold it up just so we can all see the book. Urban Gleams, Robert.
Uranian Gleams.
Uranian Gleams. Okay.
Buy it in stores near you.
Hey, buy it in a store near you. Exactly.
So I'm amazed it was only 17 pages. Wow, this is quite an eye opener. So
life has been a lie until this point, apparently.
Yeah.
Are you sure? Are you sure you didn't wake up as a different person somewhere along the line when after you wrote the story?
Well, so that's something one can't prove. You see, that's the point. One can't prove it. I don't know what a psychologist would say. Perhaps they'd say that because your brain is the same, that the personality must be the same. But I don't see why, because the conscious mind is scientifically speaking, is an electrical web of this, that, and the other. It can't be the same when it goes to sleep. Otherwise you'd be conscious. So anyway, that's the theme.
Well, the more
But
important thing is you've written 2 short stories now.
it does look like that. Yeah, blimey. I'm
If
amazed.
if I would, I think I would take the sort of like the idea you had and make it a bit more sci-fi, and take what we learned from Call of Cthulhu last episode, and what we learned through your story this episode, and perhaps there could be a very interesting story somewhere there in the middle about a scientist who is basically mocked through the institutions and societies because he still takes shuttles instead of going through teleportations, right?
Yeah.
And he, like his nephew is like, dude, you're weird. What is this about? And he's like, no, I'm telling you, not only are we not the same person, like our country, our government is actively using this stuff to make you more sort of like susceptible to the ideology. So you go once through this thing, you're gonna start thinking differently. I'm telling you, and there is no way you can figure it out, right? So and the story would be about the nephew finding out that his professor has died, apparently, right? Mysteriously, and he would be investigating what happened to him, and did he really just die randomly, or some sort of and the thing that tips him off is that he died during a teleporter accident, and he knows that his his uncle or whatever would not ever use it.
So like
Boom, there you go.
a little bit Matrix-ish, the Fly-ish, and Metamorphosis-ish by Kafka. Am I right?
Yes.
All 3 of them mixed together.
I suppose you could write a short shocker about someone who's creating trouble for the authorities, protesting about matter transmission on the grounds that Nikki's just suggested, and the end of the story is he's drugged and he's put into the system, and built up at the other end, and then he wakes up and he's still insisting on being a pain in the neck to the authorities, and then the door opens and he sees himself. In other words, they copied him twice. And yeah,
there you go.
I love it.
Very flyish. So does that mean that you will actually write that short story now, Rob?
I can't see myself doing it. No.
So we went through all
I'll
that.
let you do that one. Yeah.
I thought about it, and no.
So what are you working on now, Rob?
Oh, I'm on. I'm doing 2 things at once, which I hardly ever did before in my life, but I'm finding it quite fun. I'm doing one short story called Rescue on Dione, and the other thing I'm doing is Chapter 18 of Uranian Throne, which is a novel I'm doing on my website.
That's cool.
Nice.
So there we are. And I'm I don't know if I mentioned this before, but actually, rather than do the whole thing and then post it up, I'm posting up every bit that I do, and I'm finding people are interested in looking at how it's progressing from day to day. Judging from the viewing figures, it seems that seems to be of interest to some people.
Interesting concept. I might adopt it. I might adopt it.
Pardon?
I might.
He may adopt it.
Oh yes, yeah. I would recommend it actually because
I hear my alarm. Just give me a second.
yeah.
I'm so sorry, guys.
No worries at all.
I
All right.
see
Let the chaos commence. The teacher's out of the chair.
I'll blow my nose now.
That's your idea of chaos?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Everybody had to hear that. My fault.
I didn't hear anything. But
No,
Okay,
neither
cool.
did I.
that's just me.
I'm sure my mic would catch it or something.
We'll see in the edit. Who knows?
Yeah. All right.
So-
Sorry, you were saying before I had to go off and do stuff. Rob.
I can't remember what was I saying.
Hmm.
I've got a very short-term memory, like a goldfish, you know, or even shorter.
Well, I was saying that I'm going to adopt the.
Oh, yes.
method. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
absolutely have like a canvas actually. Yeah, that would be nice. On my own
Because
website.
you're an artist, so you could show different stages of the picture you're doing. Yeah.
Which reminds me, I've completed the cover art of my book.
Ooh.
Oh,
Just
the
one.
long tail saga.
Yes, just one. Unfortunately, I'm recording, so I can't use the screen right now. But to show you guys, but it'll be it. So that's done. I'm gonna do a map. Suggestion is courtesy of Rob. Thank you very much.
And a glossary or
That-
reference.
That's a stretch goal. I mean, I want to push the book out first. Maybe like a second edition, I might add the glossary.
Hmm.
Yeah. But
Cool stuff.
Yeah, just the map and then the proper table of contents, and then I'm done with the book, and I will be ready to start working on volume 2 of The Adventures of Longtail.
Right.
Fantastic news. Congratulations.
So there we are.
Right. Well, is there anything else anyone wants to talk about, because we're closing to the 1 hour mark?
Fantastic story. Thank you for showing it to us, Robert.
Well, thanks for your
great
positive feedback.
Yeah.
I can't promise I'll do any more like that.
It's a very atmospheric short story, which I think for a short story is extremely important.
But even one story such as this is enough, I believe. So thank you.
Thanks.
No worries.
You're welcome.
All right, man. Will you close us off, Nikki?
Well, everyone, thank you for watching. There will be a link to the story below. Please have a look at it, enjoy it, and as always, keep reading.
All right.
Right.
There we go. Goodbye, guys.
Bye bye.